Happy birthday, Eric Owen Moss. It is your birthday. I think you are today 78 years old. You were born in 1943. So Eric Owen Moss, born in 1943 in Los Angeles, California, practices architecture with his eponymously named Los Angeles-based firm, that is Eric Owen Moss Architects, founded in 1973, that is when he was 30 years old. Moss was born in Los Angeles in 1943. He received a Bachelor of Arts from the University of California, Los Angeles in 1965, his Masters of Architecture from the University of California, Berkeley College of Environmental Design in 1968, and the second Masters of Architecture from Harvard University Graduate School of Design in 1972. Moss has taught at Southern California Institute of Architecture, SCI-Arc, since 1974 and served as director from 2002 to 2015, so for 13 years. He has held chairs at Yale and Harvard University and appointments at Columbia University, the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, and the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen. This is the man, and he seems to be happy, and why wouldn't he? He built a lot, he published a lot, and he has an interesting career. Very creative and very unconventional. Personally, I'm surprised he didn't yet receive the Pritzker Prize, but then why would he need it since he receives today the other Pritzker Prize, right? Anyway, here he is at SCI-Arc, a school which continues to provoke, and he is one of the important people there. Some drawings, he draws a lot, he drew a lot, and his drawings and his sketches are very interesting. I'll show works, I mean, drawings which are not necessarily to be called sketches, but one thing is for sure. I even thought maybe this man, this architect, could be called some kind of a James Joyce of architecture. I know he loves literature, and I know he loves complexities, and his architecture, without being truly deconstructivist work. In fact, he was not part of the deconstructivist movement. Frank Gehry was from the west side of the United States, but not him. And yet, there are elements of deconstruction, but there is also something else. And I hope to be able to somehow evoke what I want to say. Let me make sure somehow, okay, it is recording. So his architecture is visceral, is both monumental and fragile. And I think he works with opposites, with paradoxes, with conjunctio oppositorum, and his spaces are very intricate, and the articulation is beyond the simple reading of reason alone. In fact, in an interview, he said that he is very he's animated by instinct. And what is instinct? Well, in a way, instinct is the opposite of the system. You know, instinct is visceral. It comes from your whole being. It doesn't come only from the brain. And in this, I truly I am on his side, because I think we overvalue reason. And while reason is necessary, I mean, Einstein himself said that reason should be just a companion and nothing else of a vital force, which probably can be approximated with what he meant by instinct. So his architecture is subjective, but then is there only objectivity in the world? I am convinced it is not. even the most so-called objectivist person in the world is subjective. There is subjectivity in the most extreme form of objectivity. So subjectivity is not only that it is unavoidable, but it is actually an intrinsic part of life that could be beneficial if we only embrace it openly. Unfortunately, again, the timid ones, afraid of allowing their subjectivity to manifest themselves, they torture themselves and others in the name of systems, methods, analysis, and so on, forgetting synthesis. And the synthesis is actually not done by the brain, and certainly not by the brain alone. He's trying to do a work which articulates complexity in terms of its own specificity, that is complexity. There is also a roundness in his work, which I would say that somehow goes against some of the explosions and implosions of deconstructivism alone. But there is more to it. For example, Wolf Prix was said that in terms of drawings, Tom Main, also from the West Coast, who got the Pritzker Prize and runs Morphosis, that's his practice, is very good with drawings, while Eric Moss is very good with words. Well, I think both Tom Main and Eric Moss are good with both drawings and words, maybe in a different way. In the case of Eric Owen Moss, being that he was very and is very fond of literature, maybe also because his father, as I read, was a writer. I mean, you look even at this drawing. This is not truly a modernistic drawing. There is nostalgia here. Look at these animals here in the water, and look, there is also an infantile, a childlike quality in the drawing, and the figurative part. I mean, look, we even have the electrical outlet here, and how the curtain is hanged and so on. So what we see here is a drawing, in a way, not really modern, and certainly not abstract. But his architecture can be very abstract and very so-called modern, although there is somehow a shade of medievalism, if I can call it so. We'll arrive at some works that exemplify this. Now we look at some of his sketches, house he built. This is a man who doesn't seem to have a lot of inhibitions, and that's, I think, not easy to arrive at. This is the tower that he built in Los Angeles, and the structural engineer was our friend Bruce Danziger, who I was hoping he would be able to attend, but it is Sunday morning in Los Angeles, and anyway, who knows, maybe later he will show up. But through Bruce, I was able to send the invitation to Eric Owen Moss. I mean, today I also sent him to his website, or his office, but Bruce did send an invitation to Eric 2 or 3 days ago. And Bruce was the structural engineer for this tower. We are going to see it in detail. It's an excellent construction, I would say. So you see here, the rational system is sabotaged. And I think the rational system does need to be sabotaged, because reality is not only analytical, it's not only rational, it's not only strict. We all need freedom, we all need expression, and these things transcend the limitations of the system. Of course, he is using now, developed technologies, maybe not as developed like in the case of Frank Gehry, but I think that the intuitive architecture Erik Cowan Moss, and maybe even the instinctual architecture of Erik Cowan Moss is different from, let's say, the one by either Frank Gehry or Tom Main. There is a certain circularity, as if somehow Erik Cowan Moss believes in the periphery, believes in the dissolutions and fragilities of the periphery, but also he believes somehow in a center, almost in an old-fashioned way, I feel tempted to say. This building was built, and we are going to see it. It's very musical. It's very playful. It's a chance encounter with chance architecture. But he also has, as you can see, the circle, and even symmetry sometimes, like here, seems to be present. But then he sabotaged it. He also works with collages, like in this case. Now we'll go chronologically through all the works that were mentioned in the Wikipedia entry on Erik Cowan Moss. The triplex apartments in Playa del Rey, California, from 1976. Even by the standards of today, I would say that this building looks fresh and interesting. This is the model, as you can see. It's California. The colors are Californian, but we have to acknowledge it. It's a playful building, and I think it passes the test of time. 1976, so 24 plus 21, 45 years ago it was built, almost half a century ago. Now, warehouse, I have to say, he actually worked with a lot of warehouses and with a lot of unglorious circumstances. Maybe you know already, he moved after he opened his office to Culver City, which at that time was you know, a press city in a way. I mean, sorry, I don't know a lot about Culver City, but from what I read, when he moved in, there were a lot of parking lots and warehouses. Now Culver City is almost like a present day Vicenza because of him, because he built many buildings there, just as Palladio built many buildings in Vicenza. And there is a lot of cultural tourism that happens in Culver City from all over the world. Well, now is the pandemic, but before the pandemic and hopefully after the pandemic, that will continue. Why? Because of the presence of this architect in Culver City, who built a lot there, and he continues to build there, and he's happily associated with some developers who believe in you, so they transform the dream into reality. Now, this is, unfortunately, for the first 2 or 3 works, and I didn't have time to change. I have the resolution of the pictures is not great because I was taking the pictures from Google Images until I had a brilliant idea to take them from Yahoo Images, where I found larger pictures, bigger resolutions. So now please bear with me. The resolution for the first few works is not totally satisfying. But look at this. Is this a warehouse? I think it's brilliant. You know, it's fragmented, it's mysterious, it's abstract, it also has elements of figuration. Who think of this as being a warehouse, but that's what it is. You know, so you can do architecture, major architecture. In fact, this makes me remember a great the German warehouse that Frank Lloyd Wright built in his own hometown, which is now neglected, but it still exists. Also a brilliant work of architecture for a warehouse. I so regret. I truly regret, because I like this work very much, and I'm unhappy with these small pictures. Here is a bigger one, and you can contemplate. You know, it is rigorous. It is. It has rhythm. It has rhythmicity. It has technology, but it has also somehow history here, and it has the playfulness of color and the volumes, the geometries. Dance almost a little bit, although it is you know, a warehouse, and it's not extravagantly, you know, disrupting the expected geometry of what a warehouse is. I like this picture very much. In fact, I would like, I mean, look at that church behind, and then you see the warehouse. I love it. You know, you have modernity and you have a certain past behind it. And I think it's an excellent work, early work by Eric Owen Moss. This work makes me think a little bit about the convention center that Peter Eisenman built in Columbus, Ohio. But there is an important difference between that work and this one. In the case of the convention center that Peter Eisenman built, which is was also dealing with a large building that he decided to fragment. In his case, in the case of Peter Eisenman, the fragmentation, the deconstruction took place a posteriori. He started with a monolith, and then he disrupted it. But in this case, you have the feeling that from the very beginning, Eric Owen Moss generated a building that, without losing the confidence of the monolith, also asserted itself, as we can see through these, you know, smaller volumes. I truly think it's an excellent work. '708 house. It's a house in Los Angeles. Still, I'm afraid, with pictures not with the best resolution, but soon I corrected myself, and you'll enjoy large pictures. 1982. Even here, there are interesting things happening. I mean, look at that unperpendicular or non-perpendicular column here. You know, I mean, these are, you would say, exoticisms. Look also at the innovative ornamentation of this facade, which is capricious, but is not disrupting, you know, the syntax of the building. It is necessary, and I'm glad that Eric Owen Moss understood that building shouldn't be just structure, that you also need the capriciousness of ornament. And on the other hand, he didn't succumb to the incoming malevolence of postmodernism too much. Although there is a work where there is a little bit of influence, but here I think he's still pendulating between modernity and the playfulness, which is not rejecting the ornament that he welcomed. I mean, who said that architecture shouldn't be playful? Who said that architecture should be only morose And, for example, I read that if he's given to project, to make a project for a hospital, he would start thinking of that project, but not for a hospital, but for a jail. Because I think he understood that there are great risks in assuming that, a strict function could benefit only from its being taken into consideration, and that no alterations coming from possible other functions could happen. The truth is, if we adopt a strategy as the one he referred to, let's say we have to do a city hall, but instead of thinking of a city hall, we begin making a project for a factory. And then you would say, wait, what does the city hall have to do with a factory? Well, surprisingly, you might arrive at the city hall in the end, which is freshly other. And what I'm trying to say is, if you work in this way, um, of course, the functionalist would protest. But the truth of the matter is, if you are concerned with the unknown, if you are concerned with bringing in architecture surprise, and we all like surprises, sometimes even unpleasant surprises, because the surprise is forcing us to get out of our inertia and our apathy. And so if you make a hospital which has elements of another program, or if you make a city hall which has elements in its crystallization of forms and functions that derive from a different meditation on a different program, maybe something interesting happens. I mean, why should a hospital look like a hospital? I'm not saying that it should look like a prison, but then maybe you could make a prison which could look like well, I don't want to sound cynical, like an amusement park. But why can't we overlap certain functions? Why can't we make a city hall which has certain parts that look like a factory, and vice versa? There are risks here, of course, but without risking, where do we arrive? This house, I mean, look at this window here, and this became almost the number 7 here. Why did he do this? Well, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I think the number of the house includes the number 7. It doesn't it? It's 703 or something. So, maybe, I mean, I see the 0, I see the 7, and maybe the 3 somewhere else. So, why not be playful like he was here and incorporate elements of narration that belong to this house and only to this house? I think it was probably 708, right? So you have the 7 on the left, the 0 on this facade, and the 8 is here. I think it's okay. And maybe it's more than okay. The idea to bring, to narrate through architecture, I think is a positive one. Unfortunately, in today's architecture, very few buildings actually narrate anything. We don't narrate anything through our buildings. They are better or worse, realized, but they don't tell a story. There is no narration very often. There are exceptions, but not too many. I mean, look at this, playful little 7 here. Why not? Petal House. Sometimes he gives, these, literal names to his buildings. This is the Petal House. Again, but soon we'll get rid of these small resolution pictures. This is not so small, but it's not sufficiently big either. Anyway, this is the Petal House. because it has those petals in a way. It's not a, you know, it's not in a you know context with huge buildings or mansions or anything. You saw there are modest buildings here, very modest, but architecture still insinuates itself eloquently above the prose of some existing buildings. So the petals open up at the top of the building where there is also this sauna or little swimming pool or whatever it is. Now, the National Boulevard, 8522, 8522 on the National Boulevard. I don't know if I have pictures with this one. I do. Okay, now, thank God, we are beginning to have larger pictures. I mentioned the medievalism in his architecture, and it's an interesting conjunction between the clashes of modernity, even the incoherences of a certain kind of modernity and a certain nostalgia. I think Eric Owen Moss, despite his very convincing moving forward in architecture, I think he also has, sometimes at least, traces of a certain nostalgia. And I think he welcomes the labyrinth. I think he welcomes zones of shadow which are somehow pre-Renaissance. Well, some of this architecture is, you know, has some scenographic qualities, if I can call them so. But all in all, it's an architecture which welcomes diversity and multiplicity. The U.S. Irving Central Housing Office from 1989. This is, you know, he built all kinds of buildings, and not just in Culver City, but mainly in Culver City. I think his work is achieves even on one hand a level of cohesion, because that is his city, so to speak, and also his most eccentric gestures, architectural gestures, also take place in Culver City. But this is a different city. And even here we see this ability he has to create multiplicity in unity. It is you know, a building which does have unity, but also has fragmentation. Here, you know, the purist might comment on, I hope I have, no, it's a little later on. Anyway, but all in all, this is a building by Eric Owen Moss, which does not contradict the following buildings, which are going to see. So he works both within the field of res privata, meaning private houses, and also in the field of res publica, meaning public buildings. And I think he's able to bring the private into the public and the public into the private. Or, as Jean Nouvel said, bring the office into the home and the home into the office. And I think Jean Nouvel was right as well. Lynn Tower in Culver City, this is an interesting building, but it's not one of my preferred ones by him. I mean, here, when was it made? 1989. Yes, the 80s were a difficult period, in my opinion, in architecture because of the pressure that postmodernism put on architects and architecture, and it was very difficult to escape, you know, the seductions of looking backwards. This is not one of my preferred buildings by him. I have to confess. But there are interesting things here happening too, because he's able to surprise even when when you think that you already know what to expect, you have a surprise. His architecture is not esoteric, really, although some people might see esotericism in his architecture. I am not sure about that. There is a playfulness which could touch, you know, the understanding of almost anyone. I know that Peter Eisenman, for example, published a newspaper in New York for a while called Annie. Well, there are elements of this architecture which maybe could connect with any or anyone, but in the case of Peter Eisenman, any referred to architecture New York. But it was a play with a word because it was also a reference to the any. Anyway, the joy of drawing. Uh, there is a voluptuousness even in drawing. You know, I mean, he didn't have to do this drawing, but it's the exploration of the building through, manipulating the drawing even in unconventional ways. The drawing is important in Eric Owen Moss's work. Now, Paramount Laundry in Culver City. Now we are now in Culver City, all right, 1989. At that time, at the end of the 80s, I see a little bit of the shadow of postmodernism in his work, but he will transcend it. You know, again, the purist would protest this column here. You know, does it need to be so majestic, although it is sloping to support this little corner here, this beam? Probably not. But it's whimsical. It's, at that time, many architects worked with similar gestures like Stanley Tigerman and others. Anyway, again, this work done at in the second half of the 80s to me is a little bit problematic, exactly because of the, there was something in the air then, and I know it very well because I lived in the States at that time, and it was very, very difficult not to be affected by a certain malaise which had to do with the approaching end of the millennium, and thus also a certain nostalgia, looking back to history and so on. And so this could also be seen like kind of a commentary on the fragility of culture, even, not just of architecture. Although that fragility is not pointed at everywhere within the building. Gary Group. Now, this is a building that I like. It still has elements of literalness, if I am to call it so, but it's very interesting because it's an office building, I imagine. Gary Group, Culver City, 1990. But it has very interesting things going on here, like elements of deconstruction in a way. There is this is an architecture that is disruptive because it has a certain theatricality. It is theatrical. It has something of stage design, but I don't know if I can articulate properly what I want to say. There is an architecture that is rejecting the rationalist agenda, and it's promoting you know, a certain imagery that is it is in a way inspired by history, but in a I don't know how to say it. It's maybe I shouldn't say it. I have a certain intuition. What maybe animated him when he created this is an architecture that is not giving up on the circle, but at the same time is bringing in betrayals, the betrayals of dismembering, and I think somehow in this there are specificities in the work of Eric Owen Moss. The circle as a paradigm of wholeness, of unity, and then distortions and fragmentations which challenge the circle. It has been said that the world, I think this came from Giordano Bruno, that the world is a sphere, whose center is everywhere and whose periphery is nowhere. You could also, paraphrasing Giordano Bruno, say the very opposite, that the world is a sphere whose periphery is everywhere and its center is nowhere. But then, is it still a sphere? And I think Eric Owen Moss is, if not obsessed by the sphere, very interested in it. But look at this elevation. You know, and to me, it's almost phantasmagoric. You know, it's what this man was able to create of a facade, which would have been just a blunt wall, opaque wall, and it's mysterious. You know, it's what's going on here. And inside also, it's dramatic. It's in terms of shapes, maybe less a little bit in terms of materials. I mean, you know, here we have the power of you know, metal, of steel, of iron, but here, you know, some elements you can tell that they are, you know, almost stage design like. Interesting work, but again, I wish I had better pictures. Lawson Western House in Brentwood, California, 1993. There are here, I read that his work is considered neo-expressionist by some, maybe, but it doesn't have the anguish of the genuine expressionism. Although, as a complex man, Eric Owen Moss, I think, knows something about the shadows of life. And thus, expression or expressionism could be carriers of melancholia, if not worse. Maybe there is even a certain dialogue with Rudolf Steiner, a little bit, with Theosophy. But it's still California, a sunny land, you know, you cannot be too gloomy there. There are always surprises in his architecture, and he claimed that he's never, he said something which I like very much. He said, my signature is not dry, or is never dry. I like this very much. In other words, he didn't want and he doesn't want to become a signature architect, you know, whose signature is dried. No, he wants to be his signature to be wet. In other words, his signature to be continuously challenged by its new versions. In other words, he doesn't want to be stuck into a dried, you know, configuration of what his name or his signature would stand for. That's good. I think we should all try the same. Never to have dried signatures, that is dead signatures. Because we are not bureaucrats and we are not supposed to be bureaucrats. If we do sign, maybe if I am allowed to be exalted, we should sign with our own blood. Yes, and which hopefully will never dry. I love this old picture with I mean, I don't know if this one intended to become like this or it, but I like, well, I love rust. And being that I love rust, I love this. So the house is a sum of events, and you need these events both outside and inside. Again, his architecture is very visceral. He's digging into the viscerality of life, into the womb of architecture and into the womb of life. And what we see is the result of his investigations, of his explorations. The model. You see here the oblique reference to the sphere. And there is such a reference in some other works by him. He likes, he works with orthogonal systems as well, but he also welcomes the roundness of the circle and the roundness of the sphere. And look at these three windows here. They are also, events on their own. And the light and the shadow amplify the eventfulness of them being configured in this way. You see, the sphere, the circle is here. The box, Culver City, California, USA, 1994. I think he's at his best when his work is the most abstract. We have seen works like this, that because there is something in the air that other architects work. But here, there is a level of the opaque walls and the stubborn volumes that are falling, but refuse to be broken down. Does show something. Is it pessimism? To an extent, it is, but it is a questioning of the vertical and the horizontal. It is a questioning of the Cartesian premise, and I think such rejections should be encouraged. Because if we are to tell the truth about our time, we do have to assume levels of complexity rather similar to what he's doing. Sorry for the resolution. The context within which he works often is not glorious. But you see here, this is his building, that there is his tower. And I mean, in Culver City, there are, I don't know, many buildings by him. At one point, I read like 30. I don't know if he built 30, but he built a good number of buildings in Culver City. And they're all adventurous, just like this one. Rotating the cube, problematizing the cube, this sometimes malevolent playfulness with the cube is necessary, because the cube could be too static if we don't challenge it. And he's challenging the cube, as you can see. In his hands, the cube lives a tragic life in a way. But but because of that tragedy, so to speak, so to call it tragedy, it actually achieves a new life. He did a project for Gasometer in Vienna, but unfortunately his work was not built. But we'll see a lot of architectural viscerality here. Too bad it was not built. So at the bottom, we see the gasometer as we saw it ourselves when we visited Vienna. But look what he wanted to do within the gasometer. This is why I use the word visceralization. It is about the visceralization of architecture. This is about descending into the womb of architecture. Well, I see here references to Dante. Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso. Are we thinking of such matters when we design? Well, it's true, we don't often have such occasions, but maybe we can create such occasions, at least from time to time. This is an interesting work here, and it's not just the tower, but also this building. It's called the Tower, not semi-tower, but I don't know very well how to pronounce it. He has, I don't know enough, but I read that, I mean, he has influences from literature that are very informed. And, you know, those references sustain his imagination. I think we also have to acknowledge the presence of the mask. The mask in architecture is a theme which is probably worth considering. And there is a mask here. And I think the mask can be very beneficial for architecture. Even the veil, sparsity. For this one, I didn't find pictures. Hayden Boulevard, another building in Culver City. So you see, he's able to marry a certain rhythmicity that is almost rational, but then there are betrayals. And it's this conflict between, rational system, which is not totally, developed, and something else, which maybe has to do with what he called instinct or intuition, if we are to use a different word, or the irrational or the subjective. There is theater here, no doubt. It's the meeting between architecture and literature, architecture and sculpture, architecture and theater. The world as a theater. Why not? After all, it's in a way, I mean, we are actors on a stage for the world. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. Unless you want to say something, of course. So, this building, I mean, with this function, probably, a very predictable building could have been done. But this is an unexpected building done with a function which probably in the hands of many other architects would have generated a very conventional building. He's not afraid to improvise. There are improvisations here, and it is this tension between a certain longed for monumentality and fragility. Dancing bleachers. This I don't know exactly what it is. I didn't investigate. I only have a few pictures here. Um, anyway, uh, but as you can see, he takes risks, and if you inspire yourself from other fields and not just from architecture, like Wolf Prick said, if you only think of architecture, you'll only get architecture. Well, Eric Owen Moss inspires himself from other fields as well, not just architecture. This is one of my preferred buildings by him, and is because of the umbrella which gave the name to the building, which is a brilliant architectural capriciousness in a way, is this thing here. The purist and the functionalist and the morose, moralist would protest, would say that this is nonsense, that what is the meaning of it? But I would protest too against them, because I think in a way, maybe this is an explosion of the id, the one that Freud thought is the the condenser in a way of our psychic realities, emotions. No, yes, it is here that the id breaks the box and comes forward in yes, unsettling ways. But I think it is inspirational. I don't see it as a as a futile exercise or an exercise in futility. No, no, I think it's necessary to have such gestures that proclaim individuality, proclaim emotion, proclaim subjectivity. And if the one who paid for the building doesn't protest, why not do it? In a way, what we see here is exactly what Walter Gropius was referring to when he said the artist is a craftsman who is exalted. This is about exaltation. Without this, the building probably would have been closer to, prose. But because of this, it leans towards exaltation. And I think we need more exaltations in the world. So this is the umbrella building, and this is another building by him. You already saw a sketch by him, some drawings, but we are going to look at it in detail. It's an excellent building. So in this city, you can see several buildings by him, in close proximity. Now let's look at this picture again. The purist and the functionalist and the morose moralist would protest, would say, "What is this nonsense?" But they would also protest against John Ruskin, who said that in life and in nature, the most beautiful things are the most useless. And he gave us an example: the peacock's tail and the lily. And so, this is like the peacock's tail, and if nature allowed herself or itself the beauty of the uselessness of the peacock's tail, why shouldn't the human beings do the same? Sometimes when it is possible. Why not? What is the big problem with this? And look at this, I mean, I recognize myself in this image. I see my soul, I see my torments, I see my dreams, I see my nightmares, I see my longings. Yes, I see my emotions, my subjectivity. What is wrong with that? And actually, I think this stare that we can see here is better done than in many deconstructivist works, because in the deconstructivist works, the building might be exploded or imploded, but very often the escalator or the stair is conventional. In this case, the stair seems to kind of long for being organic and disjuncted and somehow closer in spirit and in form to what is around it. And I think that's a quality. Bravo, bravo to him, bravo to Eric Owen Moss. And I think this was done before the big changes in project making that parametric design and the computer brought in. This one I don't. No, I do have pictures of it. It's also in Culver City. We see that he's also capable to restrain himself and to manipulate volumes and masses without the turmoil that we just saw in the previous work. But yes, the diagonal and the inclined, the sloping surfaces, they exist. They exist because he's a dialectician, I would say. He constructs, but he's also aware of the other side, which is, disruptive in the sense that it provokes disjunctions and deconstruction. Yes, there is verticality. Yes, we have volumes which are clear cut, some of them even Cartesianly, in a Cartesian way configured, but like here, for example. But then there is the other side. There is always this play, this dialectic that I think informs his work. That's why his work is often surprising. Would we call this a clean architecture? Yes, it can be clean. If by cleanness we mean, easily recognizable geometry, order, and less, much less disorder. But he assumes the disorder, which is dialectically correlative to what we call order. There is order and disorder, in other words, both. During construction, but there are many events here. The entrance, look at this. There are many surprises and many architectural events in detail or at a larger scale. Now, this is a project he did for St. Petersburg, which was not built. I show in this presentation a few unbuilt works by him, a few projects. There is a certain level of flamboyance here, but maybe it goes with a Russian spirit. And plus, it's a theater. It's supposed to be a theater, so why not? Otherwise, as we can see, the plan is very well organized and structured. Beehive, Culver City, 2001. And the beehive, it is indeed, well, to an extent, because it is abstracted. But towards, at least from this point of view, has elements of what might be called a beehive. As I said before, there is a continuous interest in the sphere, a deformed sphere. And you know, you look at this image and then you look at this image and you see that the roundness of the world is challenged by a geometry which does not say no to the even the astute angle. I love these drawings. You know, yes, I cannot avoid our voluptuousness because I think it is a pleasure to do working drawings for such visceral, you know, sections. In fact, there is somehow more viscerality in the drawing than in the final image of the work. Maybe. This is a project that was not built, but I don't show pictures of it. This is a project where, for a competition I took myself part in. I didn't win. He won it. The Caterpillar in Los Angeles. I don't know exactly what the function was here. If any of you is interested in this work, please search for it on the web. You can find some other information. I just show some images, but it is the same Eric Owen Moss in the sense that he's, you know, investigating what I would call again the viscerality of architecture. It's a place maybe with some ludic function. I read here, and maybe it's an interesting function for this because there are he started, I guess, from the cylinder seal from various periods in the history of humankind. I don't know exactly what this was for, but as you can see, he's not just working with vectors and abstractions, but also with references to history in for certain programs. If he is a conceptualist, he is not a dry conceptualist, and that is because his signature is not dry; it's still wet. The Smithsonian Institution, the patent office building in Washington, D.C. was not built, but I don't have pictures. This one in unbuilt also in China. This one I like the model. I like the top view here. I find that this is somehow very Chinese somehow. I don't know if you ask me why is it Chinese. I don't know if I can tell you. I just feel it that it's very Chinese. Too bad it was not built. Maybe seen from the eye levels, it's not so much, but from the top. Yes, somehow the spirit of the work seen from above is a little bit simplified in these views at least, but this could be also misleading. These are just renderings. Huge museum, but it would have been an interesting work. I'm convinced if it was built. Too bad it was not built. He is without doubt, Eric Owen Moss, an architect who takes risks, and we didn't yet see everything. And his drawings, I mean, these drawings are the drawings of someone who, in my opinion, considers history and the history of architecture very seriously. Republic Square in Kazakhstan, in Almaty, in 2006. This is also an interesting project, was not built, but he can stir up our imagination, because he creates these things which are at times seem to be implausible. You know, like we'll see later on an image from his Venice Biennial contribution for the Austrian pavilion. Again, roundness is present in his work in various forms, either somehow bidimensionally or in 3 dimensions as a sphere, deformed or a little bit less deformed. But again, this is an architecture that could be uncomfortable, actually, exactly because of its uniqueness. I wish I had more pictures. Anyway, another building in Culver City, 3555 Hayden. This one is a little bit less interesting, in my opinion, or a little bit more predictable. Anyway, he did it. He built it. Not everything is supposed to be, unseen before or so. If not now, when? Now, this is he did a project, I think, for Vienna, but also I have a book here from Vienna, which was given to us when I visited with students from Bucharest, and I think he has an article he contributed to that called "Massive Attack" Symposium in Vienna, and I think the title of his talk was exactly this. Let me verify if it is so. If not now, when? If this is what it is, I would like to read it to you if it's not too long. The article the talk he gave in Vienna was called "Build Your Cities on the Slopes of Vesuvius." Beautiful. I mean, let's think a little about this title: "Build Your Cities on the Slopes of Vesuvius." That is, build your cities on the slopes of danger. No, so if you welcome danger, of course, you can cynically welcome it, but I don't think this was his case. If you welcome danger, you welcome Nietzsche, who said, "Live dangerously." So if you build your city on the slope of Vesuvius, you're actually following Nietzsche with his "Live dangerously," something we are afraid to do. Now we arrive at this tower, which I like very much, where Bruce Danziger was the engineer. It's part of that complex Summit Tower. I'm not sure I pronounce well. Also in Culver City from 2010. It's the Californian, but maybe I shouldn't locate it so strictly. I felt empty, like saying it's the Californian replica to the revolutionary towers in Russian constructivism. The fact that he was able to actually build this is almost miraculous. I wonder who paid for it and what is the, I mean, this is not a mercantile building. It's, I don't know its function. Somebody paid for this building, but the building seems to have an idealism which is in contradiction with high capitalism. So
Dan, it's meant to be like a clock tower.
Bruce, welcome. So now you have to tell us about it. So what is it?
So Frederick Samatar Smith and Laura Smith, his wife, they have a lot of property in Culver City, and this is right at the entrance of that area, and it's meant to be like a clock tower. So you'll see in some of your images that things are projected on it.
So you said it's a clock tower?
It's like a contemporary clock tower. People don't need it to tell the time, but maybe you could project cultural images. So you'll see there's those acrylic, those polycarbonate,
yes,
plexiglass panels. There's projectors behind there that project, and they have artists come and curate projection images.
So I was right. This is an idealistic tower. I mean, it doesn't have a pragmatic function per se, no?
Like, the towers in Florence, the Medici Tower, does it have a function?
Well, yes, but then you had the great Mecenas, they themselves had idealistic aspiration somehow. And I'm surprised a little bit because, I mean, I am surprised that this kind of tower was built in Culver City without, I mean, does it generate an income, this tower? Probably not.
No, but it's a beacon. And you can see, I don't know in this image, but the light rail, the metro line goes right past it.
I like it very much. So how was your collaboration with Eric?
Oh, sorry, what's the question, Dan?
I said, how was your collaboration with Eric?
Oh, it's awesome. For me as a structural engineer, working with many different architects, working with Eric for me was probably the most mysterious, because I would constantly be close to understanding what he would want to do when you have you have so many opportunities to make formal decisions when you're designing something, and the structure will either make you compromise or make it better or make it different, but the structure has its will. And I always felt like I was chasing his ideas. Like I didn't quite get it, but I thought it was wonderful. So for me, it was, kind of like the mystery of romance to work with him. Does that make sense to you, Dan?
Well, it does in a mysterious way. I think I'm chasing what you are saying as well. So it was, in a way, a poetical relationship, no? If I can call it so.
Yeah, there's something that's almost hyper rational, that there's always a good reason for doing things, but the reasons are Eric's.
I love this view, and I know he's very appreciated this tower because I read some things about it. And maybe it is true what John Ruskin said that I quoted from him. That there is a certain level of beautiful uselessness in this tower, which makes it even more beautiful. And maybe, I'm thinking, my God, I mean, that, we could create beautiful things. Now I know I could be accused that I'm a hypocrite because in the case of Olgiati, I commented on the uselessness of certain parts of his work. I'm not against uselessness. It depends. But for example, I feel much closer to the work of Eric Owen Moss because I believe he said the truth when he said that instinct is very important for him, and it's not. It's. I mean, I think. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I think he's quite capable of handling rational matters. But he allows for these capricious, if I can call them so, capricious decisions to also happen. And in all his works, I see this the pressing of something else, which is not reason alone. And that's something else I try to approximate with, the tale of the peacock, referring to Ruskin, or to Id, coming from Freud, or I don't know, instinct, intuition, subjectivity. Bruce, please help me with other words if you want. But I see in this tower a celebration of what I called before, using Ruskin's words, the peacock's tail. You know, I think we need such things in our lives. Okay, it's not always possible. Not everywhere we have Florence. Not everywhere we have the developers that luckily Eric Owen Moss works with in Culver City. But maybe in various ways it is possible to invoke the presence of the peacock somehow. It doesn't matter we are rich or poor. It doesn't matter. I think we can because this is, in my opinion, is about freedom. Is about the human spirit conquering strict necessity. What do you think, Bruce?
Yeah, I like where it's going, Dan. I don't, I'm kind of challenged to put it in a box, right?
Right. Okay. So we go to the Cactus Tower. This is an interesting tower and very different from the previous one. At first, I didn't understand why it was called Cactus Tower, but it's because in this, these things are placed the cactuses. You see the cactuses here. And, I don't know if he had this idea, or I don't know exactly why it was built. But again, he's a surrealist architectural presence here. Who think of creating a floor only for cactuses? What's going on there in Culver City? I have a feeling it's a place with some dreamers. I mean, some people paid for this, and I love it actually. I love the fact that
Culver City is the home of the Wizard of Oz.
Is it? I didn't know.
Yeah, that's where the movie was filmed.
I didn't know. Yep. Interesting.
It has a history of the movie studios going back 100 years.
This is very interesting. I think this is also his building, right? Here. We are going to see it a little later. This always puzzled me and continues to puzzle me. The meeting within the North America, meaning the United States, between pragmatism and idealism. That somehow, sometimes at least, pragmatism at its edge becomes its opposite. And I mean, again, someone paid for this tower. And, okay, I understand there is a room here, I think, because I saw a picture from the inside, but everything that is above it is, is dreaming, really. It is dreaming. And I imagine it was not a very inexpensive dream. I personally welcome surrealism in architecture. And although, again, someone would say, wait a minute, if you welcome surrealism in architecture, why were you so against that, that store by Golgiati? It's probably a good question. I have to reflect on it. Do you know, Bruce, what is the function of this tower? What's going on in these spaces here?
Oh, it's just in front. It's like it's a folly in front of an office. So there's this area in Culver City. It's called the Hayden Tract. That's named after one of the main streets. That's owned by this family, and they have a strong business case here. Their idea is that if you build art, you get higher rents. So you get like media companies and advertising companies, but you get that companies will be willing to pay higher rent if their office and the architecture is art.
Right.
So that's the premise.
Yeah, I believe there is a logic behind this premise. Yes. The Austrian pavilion in Venice, in Italy, interesting that Austria, I don't know, they commissioned him to design their own pavilion, although Austria has its own very good architects, but he did an interesting work here. I don't know, I mean, I only look at it, I had no time to investigate.
So this is, Dan, this is from the competition for Kazakhstan, that tower.
Yes.
You look at the base, there's this big spring. That spring was then was made for this pavilion.
Did you work on this project, Bruce?
I worked on the Kazakhstan project, so
you did. I feel like going back. Do you feel like telling us something about it?
Well, it's like a giant spring.
So how did he arrive to do the Austrian pavilion? That's him here. He looks a little bit like him.
Yeah, I don't know, Dan. I wasn't involved in the pavilion.
For how many projects did you collaborate with Eric Owen Moss?
Well, like 4 or 5.
And so I know of 2 now. What other projects? I mean, I have here all the works that are mentioned in the Wikipedia, in the American Wikipedia. Anyway, so this is a master plan for night, but I don't think I have pictures with it. I don't. I mean, I saw some images, but it wasn't unclear to me. It seems it's a very large and complex body of work there, and it goes on. He was just doing urbanism, I guess, there. But this is an interest. Maybe you, Bruce, know something about this project in Barcelona, Térmicas del Besos. This seems to be
No, I don't know anything about this.
Almost science fiction. It's a technical project. I don't know what this means in Catalan, Térmicas del Besos. I plan to investigate, but I didn't. But the work is, and here it is again that reference to the medieval world, but also to futurism. It's both futuristic and with something medieval. And I think such conjunctions are present in his work, at least from time to time. These are giant. and they do have presence. I hope they build that. The round towers, which for me are somehow medieval, because they are not glass towers, but they are opaque towers. Yes, they evoke for me a certain liking that I imagine he has for the medieval world. Now we arrive at this remarkable building, the pterodactyl building in Culver City. Did you work on this, Bruce? Anyway, I like this building because it is, again, multiplicity in unity. It is fragmented. We see the umbrella on the right side, and this, I can't pronounce it, the pterodactyl. I imagine there is some kind of reference to fauna. Anyway, biology, I don't know, to some kind of disappear.
Yeah, I didn't work on this, Dan, but pterodactyl is like the giant flying dinosaur. So it's the idea is this creature landed on top of a garage.
Interesting. And again, now that you mentioned that there is a history of the place with the Wizard of Oz and the making of movies there, it makes sense because it's so I always felt that his architecture is a narrative architecture. It tells a story. Explicitly or implicitly, there is some reference to a story. There is a story. He's a storyteller. And I know his father was a writer, and I know literature is important for him. And but maybe not just literature. Anyway, I like this building. So the dinosaur falling on a garage. Inside, though, it's regular life, so to speak. I don't know what the function of the building is. Probably some media companies. The image on the right resembles a little bit, I think, the rooftop addition by Kopp Himmelblau in Vienna. So the dinosaur also moved from Culver City to Vienna and from Vienna to Culver City. Except that in Vienna it landed on top of an apartment building 7 or 8 floors high, here on top of a garage. It's amazing to me what Erik Owen Moss was able to do to transform garages and warehouses into a significant architecture. I noticed here these cups, these containers on top of each monitor. I don't know what they mean. What is their function anyway? So again, in my opinion, he's at his best when the level of abstractness or abstraction is higher. But the ability to handle complex geometries like here, he had from the very beginning. Now he's helped by the new technologies, but he always was able to dissect, architectural organisms, and the dissections were often very complex. That's why I say that his architecture is a visceral architecture. Okay, so now we go to a building, to a work which was unbuilt. Here we see the same towers, as I call them, somehow medieval towers. It was not built, but maybe exactly his references to a certain past sometimes could create some difficulties for him, in the sense that maybe it's easier for possible clients to commission architects who do not venture in taking risks in insinuating possible relationships between the proposal and I don't know, in this case, maybe medieval towers. I think his architecture is a difficult, could be, sometimes is a difficult architecture. Like here, you have these opaque towers, sometimes contorted, and then with this unusual bottom and floating almost on almost on thin air. But it could have been perhaps appropriate for Russia to build something like this, because I think the Russian culture and the Russian spirit do have a dimension which is not, which is in a way kind of like this, a little bit almost burlesque, phantasmagoric. I don't know very well how to describe it now. I think Eric Owen Moss also is not afraid to assume even what might be called the ugly. And maybe here I can recall the words of Peter Eisenman, who was searching for the grotesque, a play with on the grotesque. There are meetings between what we call the beautiful and what we call the ugly, between the princess and the dinosaur or the monster, and the sublime, as Peter Eisenman said, was born exactly at that juncture between that meeting between what we call the beautiful and what we call the opposite of the beautiful. You can call it ugly or monstrous even. So this is a difficult topic. Maybe the beautiful in itself, by itself, is not enough. Because the beautiful by itself does not arrive at the sublime. In order to arrive at the sublime, you also have to assume the opposite of what is beautiful. But what I see here is a fantastic, in a way, architecture, and I regret it was not built, and probably it will not be built. We are approaching the end of the presentation. It would be interesting actually to even study these sketches and read what he wrote, and to discover the sources of the design. I think Zaha Hadid also worked for this project. It might be that actually this image is from Zaha Hadid, I'm not sure. And I like his sketches, you know, les mots et les images, the words and the images. You can tell he's not, I mean, he talks about the instinct, but there is also reason here, clearly. I mean, even in the graphic aspects of his sketches, you can tell that he can be very organized and logical, and he works with points, with A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So he's not just this instinctual beast, so to speak. No, far from it. Vespertine, Culver City. This is a newer building from 2017. He's building now, we are approaching the end of the presentation, he's building another, well, a tower, not an excessively tall tower, certainly not like the ones built by Shop in Manhattan or Brooklyn. I like this building, you know, it's again, the problematization of the grid as an expression of reason, the bringing in the other forces, you know, the subjectivity, the subject, yes, what is subjective, the irrational, the curvature, the capricious, maybe meandering, and yet it is structural, it is ordered. It's a good tower, I would say. And I like the fact that you can't easily read how many floors it has. So although he talked against the system, he can also be systematic, but not in a dry way, not because, I mean, because his signature is not dry. So the system is humid, if I can say so. It's not dry. It's not a dry system. So today he's 78 years old, Eric Owen Moss. Now the wrapper, and now we end our presentation on his works. This is a building that is still in the process of becoming, but the construction started, and we'll see a few images. I'm particularly fond of the knot. I like knots, and I like, you know, this kind of, I mean, what is the knot? You know, the knot is an expression of, you know, in a way of the unknown. And it is a scandal for the intelligence. It is a scandal for reason. And this building is telling us that things are not as simple as, you know, the previous forms of functionalism or international style or rationalism and Cartesianism, objectivism claimed. The world is a web now. It is a web, and I see that this is a webbed building in a way. It's a woven building, and so I like this aspect of being woven, and I like the knot. And I'm glad it's being built. Here it is, the construction site. Another adventure by Eric Owen Moss. And as I keep saying to myself and others, architecture is beautiful and is worth pursuing if it is an adventure. If it is not an adventure, then well, life itself is beautiful if it is an adventure. But we know that adventures have luminous parts and parts which are problematic, sometimes even painful. What can we do? So here it is. The adventure started, and these people are willing to move forward, as we can see. The building will be built, is being built. Thank you, Eric Owen Moss, and thank you, Bruce, for being here. Happy birthday, Eric Owen Moss. And as I said, even though he is not here now, but I will send him the presentation, even though, you know, the presentation could have been maybe better, but it is our sincere homage to him. And I also want to say that, in my opinion, he deserved the Pritzker Prize for assuming that the adventure of pushing forward architecture. And if Stephen Hall received that, you know, immaterial and unofficial so-called prize, the other Pritzker, and if Wolf Prix received it, and if Bernard Tschumi received it, and if Eric Miralles, well, he didn't receive it, but I thought of offering him this prize because I think he deserved it too. It didn't matter. He's not alive with us. I think he deserves it, and so does Eric Owen Moss. And in the fall, I'm thinking to do the same with Peter Eisenman. So then we'll have Stephen Hall, Wolf Prix, Bernard Tschumi, Eric Owen Moss, and Peter Eisenman, 5 architects who didn't get the Pritzker Prize, and maybe they don't miss it. It's after all just a prize, but it's about recognizing a level of excellence. And in my opinion, Eric Owen Moss did achieve levels of excellence, and so did the other architects. So I would be very happy if in the fall I will succeed in you know, inviting them, all 5 of them, to have a discussion about architecture today. I don't know if I will succeed, but I will try. So happy birthday, Eric Owen Moss.